To truly understand Marcus Aurelius's meditations, that profound outpouring of a soul grappling with the immense burdens of leadership and existence, we must first step back in time. We need to immerse ourselves in the world he inhabited, a world of both grandeur and precariousness, and then journey into the philosophical currents that shaped his very being. This is the world of the philosopher king, a realm where the ancient wisdom of Stoicism was not merely an academic pursuit, but a shield against chaos, a compass for the soul. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire during the 2nd century AD, a period often romanticized as the zenith of Roman power and prosperity. This was the era of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a stretch of nearly 2 centuries following the civil wars that had seen unparalleled stability, economic growth, and the expansion of Roman influence across a vast swathe of the known world. Imagine a sprawling empire stretching from the deserts of North Africa to the misty shores of Britain, from the Atlantic coast to the Mesopotamian plains, all bound by a common language, a sophisticated legal system, and an awe-inspiring network of roads, aqueducts, and administrative structures. It was a testament to human organization and ambition, a golden age where, for many, life under Roman rule offered a degree of security and opportunity rarely seen before or since. This period was notably defined by what historians would later call the 5 good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and finally, Marcus Aurelius himself. What made them good was their remarkable practice of adopting their successors based on merit and capability, rather than bloodline. This system, for a time, ensured a succession of highly competent and dedicated rulers, each chosen for their administrative prowess and their commitment to the welfare of the empire. Marcus was the last of these, adopted by Antoninus Pius and rigorously groomed for the throne from a young age. He inherited an empire that, on the surface, seemed unshakable, a jewel of civilization. Yet beneath this gilded surface, tectonic plates were shifting. The Pax Romana, as glorious as it was, harbored deep fissures, and Marcus's reign, in particular, would mark a turning point. It was during his time on the throne that the cracks in this magnificent edifice truly began to show, forcing him to confront challenges of a magnitude that tested not only the empire's resilience, but his own spiritual fortitude. Perhaps the most devastating of these was the Antonine Plague, which swept across the empire from around 165 AD and persisted, in various waves, for over a decade. Carried back by victorious legions returning from campaigns in the east, this mysterious disease, likely a strain of smallpox or measles, decimated the population. Estimates suggest it might have killed between 5% and 10% of the entire empire, perhaps even up to a third in some regions, with some historians proposing up to a quarter of the population of the empire, potentially 5 to 10 million people. Imagine the sheer horror: cities overflowing with the dead, fields left untended, legions depleted, and the social fabric straining under the weight of such widespread suffering and loss. It was a crisis that shattered public confidence, challenged traditional Roman religious beliefs, and plunged society into a profound state of grief and fear. Marcus, as emperor, was not immune. He saw his friends, his family, even his co-emperor Lucius Verus fall victim to the scourge. This experience must have deeply etched into his consciousness the fragility of life, the capriciousness of fate, and the ever-present shadow of mortality. It intensified his need for an inner citadel, a philosophy that could provide solace and meaning amidst such overwhelming sorrow. And if the plague was an invisible enemy from within, the Marcomannic Wars presented a very tangible, brutal threat from without. Beginning around 166 AD, various Germanic tribes, the Marcomanni, Quadi, Lombards, and others, along with Sarmatian peoples, began to press against Rome's northern frontiers along the Danube River. This was not a minor border skirmish, it was a sustained and existential threat to the heart of the empire. Marcus spent much of the last decade of his life, from 170 AD until his death in 180 AD, campaigning on these cold, muddy frontiers, far from the comforts and intellectual circles of Rome. He was a soldier emperor, leading his legions, enduring physical hardship, making life-or-death decisions on a daily basis. The very existence of his meditations, written in snatches in his tent among the Quadi, as he himself tells us, is a testament to the extraordinary pressures he faced. It was in these dire circumstances, amidst the clamor of war and the shadow of plague, that his need for inner stability became not just a philosophical preference, but a vital, practical necessity. He sought to cultivate an unshakable inner calm, a rational resilience that would allow him to navigate the most turbulent of external storms. This inner stability, this philosophical anchor, was found in Stoicism. To appreciate Marcus Aurelius's unique contribution, we must first understand the bedrock upon which his thought was built, the ancient Greek philosophy of Stoicism. Its origins lie nearly 5 centuries before Marcus in the bustling city of Athens. The school was founded around 300 BC by Zeno of Citium, a merchant from Cyprus who, after being shipwrecked near Athens, discovered philosophy. He began teaching his new doctrines at the Stoa Poikal, the painted porch, a public colonnade adorned with murals in the agora. This open-air setting was symbolic. Unlike the secluded gardens of the Epicureans or the private gymnasiums of the Peripatetics, Stoicism was intended to be accessible, public, and applicable to the everyday lives of ordinary citizens, slaves, and kings alike. Zeno's initial teachings were further developed and systematized by his successors, most notably Cleanthes and then Chrysippus. Chrysippus, in particular, was considered the second founder of Stoicism due to his immense prolificacy. He reportedly wrote over 700 books, meticulously detailing every aspect of the philosophy, so much so that it was said, if Chrysippus had not existed, the Stoa would not have existed. These early Greek Stoics laid the robust intellectual framework that would endure for centuries and eventually capture the mind of a Roman emperor. Stoicism, as a comprehensive philosophical system, was traditionally divided into 3 interconnected parts: physics, ethics, and logic. The Stoics often used a memorable analogy to explain this. Philosophy is like a fertile orchard. Logic is the sturdy fence protecting it, physics is the rich soil and the thriving trees, and ethics is the sweet fruit produced for consumption. Each part was essential and informed the others. Let's begin with physics, for it provided the Stoics with their understanding of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. For them, the universe was not a chaotic, random collection of atoms, but an orderly, rational, and living organism pervaded by a divine, active principle they called the Logos. This cosmic reason, often conceived as a kind of fiery breath or pneuma, permeated everything, shaping and guiding events according to an immutable plan or fate. Everything that happens, they believed, happens for a reason, unfolding in accordance with this rational, providentially ordered universe. This concept of a rational and deterministic cosmos led to the Stoic idea of sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things. Just as our own body's parts work together, so too do all elements of the universe affect one another. This understanding fostered a profound sense of unity with nature, urging individuals to accept their place within this grand cosmic design. Marcus frequently echoes this sentiment in Meditations, reminding himself that he is part of a larger whole, subject to its laws and cycles. He would often reflect on the constant flux of the universe, writing, "The universe is change. Life is opinion." Meditations 4.34, emphasizing the ephemeral nature of all things, yet within an overarching rational structure. This cosmic framework naturally led to ethics, the most prominent and practical aspect of Stoicism for daily living. If the universe is rational and orderly, then the highest good for human beings, as rational creatures, must be to live in agreement with nature. This meant living in accordance with our own rational faculty, aligning our will with the cosmic Logos. For the Stoics, virtue was the sole good, not wealth, not health, not pleasure, not reputation. These were all external indifferents, adiaphora. While some indifferents were preferred, like health over sickness, they were never considered good in themselves because they could not guarantee happiness or moral excellence. Only virtue, defined by the 4 cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, was intrinsically good and sufficient for eudaimonia, or human flourishing. This sharply distinguished Stoicism from Aristotelian virtue ethics, which, while also prioritizing virtue, considered certain external goods, like good birth, friends, wealth, and health, as necessary components, or at least facilitating conditions for a complete and flourishing life. For Aristotle, eudaimonia was a more holistic flourishing, encompassing both internal excellence and a certain degree of external fortune. Stoics, especially later ones like Marcus, pushed further, arguing that virtue alone was truly good and sufficient, precisely because it was entirely within our control and immune to the vagaries of fate. Central to Stoic ethics was the goal of apatheia, a term often misunderstood in modern usage. It does not mean apathy, a lack of feeling or indifference to suffering. Rather, apatheia means freedom from destructive passions, pathe, those irrational and often intense emotions that cloud judgment and disturb tranquility. These pathe included excessive fear, unbridled desire, consuming grief, and irrational anger. The Stoic aimed not to suppress all emotion, but to cultivate a state of rational calm and inner serenity where reason held sway over impulse. This led to a state of ataraxia, freedom from disturbance, and euthymia, cheerfulness or inner contentment. This distinction also serves to differentiate Stoicism from its philosophical cousin, Cynicism. While both schools advocated for a life in accordance with nature, the Cynics, exemplified by figures like Diogenes of Sinope, adopted a far more radical form of asceticism, often rejecting social conventions, property, and even basic decorum as unnatural. Stoics, on the other hand, while maintaining inner detachment, embraced their roles in society, serving as statesmen, soldiers, and citizens, seeing their duty as part of living in agreement with the greater human and cosmic nature. Finally, we come to logic, which for the Stoics was not just about formal reasoning, but also about epistemology and psychology, how we perceive the world and form judgments. The cornerstone of Stoic logic was the theory of impressions, phantasiae, and assent, synkatathesis. Impressions are the raw data of experience, the involuntary appearances that come to our mind, e.g., I see a snake, I feel cold, someone insulted me. These impressions are involuntary, we don't choose what appears to us. However, our assent to these impressions, our judgment about them, whether we deem them true, false, good, or bad, is entirely voluntary and within our control. This is where human freedom truly lies. We cannot control external events, but we can control how we interpret and react to them. This leads directly to the famous Stoic dichotomy of control, distinguishing what is within our power from what is not. Our opinions, impulses, desires, and aversions are within our power. They are our own acts of judgment and will. Our body, possessions, reputation, social standing, and external events are not within our power. This simple yet profound distinction is the beating heart of Stoic practice and a recurring theme in Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. By focusing our efforts and concerns solely on what is within our control, our inner world, our judgments, our character, we achieve tranquility, regardless of external circumstances. As Epictetus, one of Marcus's most significant influences, famously put it, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Or, more accurately from his Enchiridion, a handbook summarizing his teachings, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will be serene. Marcus Aurelius's intellectual journey was shaped by a constellation of mentors, each contributing to the philosophical tapestry he wove into his life. From a tender age, he received an exceptionally rigorous education, reflecting the Roman aristocratic tradition of intellectual cultivation. In Book 1 of Meditations, he meticulously enumerates his gratitude to various tutors, attributing specific virtues and lessons learned from each. He thanks his great-grandfather Verus for good character and abstaining from anger, and his tutor Diognetus for teaching him not to be distracted by trifles and to be skeptical of charlatans. He praises Rusticus, an influential Stoic teacher and consul, for turning him away from rhetorical sophistry and for introducing him to the philosophical writings of Epictetus. It was Epictetus's discourses, as recorded by his student Arrian, that proved to be a singular, transformative influence on Marcus. Epictetus himself was a remarkable figure. A former slave who gained his freedom and went on to teach philosophy, enduring a limp he acquired through ill treatment. His teachings were intensely practical, delivered through vivid lectures and dialogues, emphasizing the application of Stoic principles to everyday challenges. The discourses are a direct, no-nonsense manual for living, focused almost exclusively on the dichotomy of control and the cultivation of inner freedom. For a young Marcus, being groomed for the immense responsibilities of empire, Epictetus's direct counsel would have resonated deeply. It wasn't abstract theory, it was a blueprint for psychological resilience and moral integrity in the face of inevitable adversity. Marcus, in his own words, absorbed these lessons, turning them into the foundational maxims of his personal philosophy. This brings us to the fascinating concept of the philosopher king, an ideal first articulated by Plato in his magnum opus, The Republic. Plato famously argued that societal ills would never cease until philosophers are kings, or the kings and princes of this world have the spirit and power of philosophy. For Plato, the ideal ruler would be someone who possessed not merely political power, but also profound wisdom, a deep understanding of the eternal forms of goodness, justice, and beauty. Such a ruler, through rational insight and philosophical training, would be uniquely equipped to guide the state towards justice and harmony, acting not out of self-interest, but out of a reasoned understanding of the common good. Plato's vision was of a state meticulously ordered according to rational principles, often implying a detachment from the messy, empirical realities of politics in favor of abstract, ideal forms. Marcus Aurelius, as a Stoic emperor, embodied this ideal, but with a distinctly Stoic interpretation that grounded Plato's lofty vision in the harsh realities of governance. Marcus wasn't designing an ideal state from first principles, like Plato's philosopher gazing at the forms. He was ruling a colossal, diverse, and often turbulent empire, grappling with plagues, wars, economic crises, and complex administrative duties. His philosophy wasn't an escape from this reality, but rather a robust framework for engaging with it honorably and effectively. For Marcus, being a philosopher king meant applying Stoic principles of duty, service, self-mastery, and rationality directly to the colossal task of imperial administration. It meant maintaining inner integrity and serenity while making difficult decisions that affected millions. His kingship was a vocation, a function assigned by the cosmic logos, demanding his best efforts in service to humanity, even when it meant personal sacrifice and prolonged hardship on distant frontiers. He understood that his rational nature compelled him to serve the greater good, not to luxuriate in power. To grasp the practical essence of Stoicism, we can look at other notable figures. The very founding of the Stoa Poikile by Zeno serves as an initial example, highlighting the public, accessible, and inclusive nature of early Stoic teaching, open to all who sought wisdom, regardless of social standing. For a Roman parallel, we turn to Seneca the Younger, a generation before Marcus. His letters to Lucilius offer an earlier, equally compelling example of Stoicism applied to real life. Seneca, a prominent statesman, orator, and playwright, penned 124 letters advising his younger friend Lucilius on how to live a virtuous and tranquil life amidst the political intrigue and moral pitfalls of Nero's court. These letters are filled with practical exercises, moral exhortations, and philosophical insights, mirroring the deeply personal and instructional nature that Marcus would later adopt in his meditations. Both works underscore that Stoicism was never just an academic exercise, it was a daily practice, a constant self-assessment, a readiness for life's challenges. Of course, no philosophical school exists without its critics, and Stoicism faced its share of rigorous counterarguments from rival schools, particularly the Epicureans and the Skeptics. The Epicureans, founded by Epicurus around the same time as Zeno, presented a significant challenge to Stoic ethics. Epicurus taught that the highest good was pleasure, not in the vulgar sense of hedonism, but as ataraxia, freedom from disturbance in the mind, and aponia, absence of pain in the body. This was achieved through moderate living, cultivating friendship, pursuing intellectual inquiry, and crucially, withdrawing from public life and its associated anxieties. From their perspective, Stoic asceticism and their insistence on virtue as the sole good seemed unnecessarily harsh and unnatural. Why deny natural pleasures or cultivate indifference to physical pain, which are inherently unpleasant? Epicureans argued that such an approach was contrary to human nature, which is instinctively drawn to pleasure and averse to pain. For them, pleasure was the beginning and end of the blessed life, as Epicurus himself stated. They viewed the Stoic indifference to pleasure as a denial of a fundamental aspect of human well-being, suggesting that a life without moderate, natural pleasures would be impoverished rather than enriched. They questioned the Stoic devaluation of things like health, wealth, and friendship, seeing them as essential components for a truly pleasant and tranquil existence, even if they could be lost. Another significant challenge came from the skeptics, particularly the academic skeptics who followed Plato's academy after his death. Figures like Arcesilaus and Carneades revived the Socratic tradition of questioning everything, doubting the very possibility of certain knowledge. Their critiques struck at the heart of Stoic epistemology, which relied on the concept of cataleptic impressions. The Stoics believed that certain impressions, those that were clear, distinct, and directly corresponded to reality, were so compelling and self-evidently true that they forced one's assent, thus providing a basis for certain knowledge. They were like an open-hand perception, closing into a firm grasp, assent. The skeptics, however, argued that there was no infallible criterion to distinguish a true cataleptic impression from a false one. How could one be absolutely certain that what one perceived was real, and not a dream, an illusion, or a cleverly crafted deception? If one cannot trust the reliability of one's impressions, then how can one make rational judgments about the world or choose a virtuous course of action? This fundamental doubt about the possibility of certain knowledge challenged the entire rational edifice of Stoic philosophy, which assumed that reason, informed by reliable perception, could guide one to truth and virtue. The Stoics, while acknowledging the challenge, ultimately responded by arguing for pragmatic certainty, living according to probabilities and what was plausible when absolute certainty was elusive, still holding that discerning truth was possible and necessary for moral action. In conclusion, Marcus Aurelius's meditations are not merely the musings of a philosopher. They are the private spiritual exercises of an emperor-warrior, forged in the crucible of unprecedented historical challenges. He inherited the Pax Romana, a golden age, only to preside over its twilight, facing down a devastating plague and relentless barbarian invasions. His relentless pursuit of inner stability through Stoicism was not an academic luxury, but a vital strategy for survival, for maintaining his integrity and effectiveness as the leader of the Western world. He took the foundational principles laid down by Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus, the rational cosmos of physics, the virtue-centric ethics of apatheia, and the impression-based logic of control, and applied them with an intensity born of necessity. Influenced profoundly by the practical wisdom of Epictetus, Marcus embodied a distinctly Stoic version of Plato's philosopher king, not an ideal ruler in an ideal state, but a profoundly human emperor striving for virtue and wisdom in a flawed and tumultuous world. His journey, marked by personal loss, political burdens, and military campaigns, underscores that the Meditations are more than just a book. They are a battle plan for the soul, a testament to the enduring power of philosophy to provide solace, guidance, and strength when the world around us seems to crumble. It is this deeply personal struggle, informed by ancient wisdom and faced with daunting reality, that makes his words resonate so powerfully with us even today. Our journey into the world of Marcus Aurelius brings us now to the very heart of his philosophy, the bedrock upon which his entire system of self-mastery is built. The concept of the inner citadel. Imagine, if you will, a formidable fortress, unassailable and impregnable, with towering walls and unyielding gates deep within the core of your being. This is the metaphor Marcus frequently uses to describe the human mind, our faculty of judgment, and the realm of reason, a sanctuary that, he insists, is entirely within our control and utterly impervious to the buffetings and assaults of the external world. For Marcus, the emperor, the general, the philosopher king burdened by the weight of an empire, this inner citadel wasn't a mere poetic fancy. It was a psychological and ethical imperative, a daily discipline. He lived in a world of constant threats, plagues, wars, political intrigue, personal betrayals, and devastating losses. Yet throughout his meditations, we find him repeatedly urging himself, and by extension us, to withdraw into this inner fortress, to secure its gates, and to discern what truly lies within its dominion. He believed that while our bodies, our possessions, our reputation, and even our very lives might be snatched away by fortune, our mind, our capacity for judgment, our moral character, these remain untouchable, our ultimate and inviolable possession. This profound conviction stems directly from the ancient Stoic theory of impressions, or phantasiae, and the crucial role of what they called assent, or synkatathesis. To understand the inner citadel, we must first grasp this fundamental distinction. Think of impressions as the raw, unfiltered data that floods our senses and our consciousness. A sudden noise, the sight of a challenging task, a sharp pain, an insult from a colleague, the news of a loved one's illness, these are all impressions. They are neutral events, mere data points flowing into our awareness. The Stoics taught that these impressions in themselves are neither good nor bad, they just are. The critical juncture, the very moment where our inner citadel either stands firm or crumbles, lies in our response to these impressions. It is here that assent comes into play. Assent is our judgment, our agreement or disagreement with an impression. It is the act of saying, yes, this impression is true, or no, this impression is false, or crucially, yes, this impression means something is bad or good. Marcus, following Epictetus, recognized that our emotional responses, our fear, anger, grief, anxiety, do not arise directly from the impressions themselves. They arise from our assent to them, from the judgments we make about those impressions. This is perhaps one of the most liberating, yet challenging, insights of Stoicism. Marcus hammers this point home relentlessly, often quoting or paraphrasing Epictetus. It is not things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about these things. Take a moment to truly absorb the radical implications of that statement. It suggests that if you feel upset by someone's rude comment, it is not the comment itself that has disturbed your peace. It is your judgment that the comment was an insult, or that it means something negative about you, or that it ought not to have been said. If you are anxious about a future event, it is not the event itself, which hasn't even happened, but your judgment that it will be terrible, or that you cannot cope with it, or that you must prevent it at all costs. This understanding becomes the primary tool for guarding the inner citadel. Marcus repeatedly urges himself to withdraw into the realm of reason, into his logos, to examine each impression critically before granting it assent. His practice is to strip away the layers of subjective interpretation and value judgment, to see things as they objectively are. When confronted with something he finds unpleasant, he'll ask himself, what is this in itself? He might look at a delicious meal and remind himself, this is merely a piece of a dead pig. Not to diminish the joy of eating, but to prevent his mind from attaching excessive desire or aversion to it. He wants to see things nakedly, devoid of the emotional baggage we often pile upon them. Consider, for example, the perception of an annoying person. Our immediate impression might be one of irritation, perhaps even anger. But Marcus would prompt us to withdraw into our reason and ask, what is this person objectively? He is a human being like me, perhaps striving for what he believes is good, perhaps mistaken, perhaps suffering from ignorance or delusion. The annoying quality is not inherent in the person, but in my judgment of their actions. By reframing the annoying person as merely an ignorant one, or one operating under different impressions, Marcus seeks to disarm the emotional charge and prevent anger or frustration from breaching his inner fortress. He recognizes that the other person's actions are external, outside his control, and therefore cannot truly harm him unless he allows them to. This active discernment between objective reality and subjective judgment is the cornerstone of securing the inner citadel. It leads us naturally to the core Stoic virtues, which Marcus emphasizes as the only true good, in stark contrast to what they called indifference. These are the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. For Marcus, these aren't just desirable traits, they are the very fabric of our rational human nature, the pillars that support our inner fortress. Wisdom, Sophia or prudence, is the first and guiding virtue. It's not about encyclopedic knowledge, but about practical reason, discernment, and understanding what is truly good, bad, or indifferent. It is the ability to see clearly, to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not, and to make sound judgments based on this understanding. It is the skill of navigating the complex terrain of life with clarity and purpose, ensuring that our actions align with reason and virtue. Wisdom tells us that our emotional reactions are a result of our judgments, and therefore, we have control over them. It is the architect of the inner citadel, planning its defenses and strategies. Justice, dikaiosune for Marcus, is paramount because we are, by nature, social beings. We are parts of a larger whole, members of a cosmic community. Justice, therefore, is about fairness, about acting in accordance with our duty to humanity, about treating others as fellow rational beings. It extends beyond legalistic definitions to encompass benevolence, kindness, and a recognition of our shared rationality and interconnectedness. Even as emperor, Marcus emphasized his role as a servant to the common good, not as a ruler above it. To be unjust for a Stoic is to act contrary to reason and our nature, thereby harming oneself far more than any external injury could. Justice is the citadel's purpose, the reason it exists not just for itself, but for the larger city. Courage, Andrea, or fortitude is more than mere physical bravery in battle, though Marcus certainly possessed that. It is mental fortitude, the resilience to face adversity, pain, fear, and loss without compromising one's virtue. It is the courage to stand firm in one's principles, to endure what cannot be avoided, and to face the truth, however harsh. For Marcus, courage meant not succumbing to despair in the face of plague, not giving in to fear during war, and not allowing the inevitable setbacks of life to erode his commitment to reason. It is the strength of the citadel's walls, allowing it to withstand any siege. Finally, temperance, sophrosine, or self-control, is the mastery over our desires and impulses. It's about moderation, contentment, and the ability to refrain from excess. It's not asceticism for its own sake, but the rational control of appetites so that they do not control us. Marcus constantly reminded himself to be moderate in food, drink, and pleasure, to avoid arrogance, and to be content with what is. This virtue ensures that our inner citadel is not undermined by internal mutiny, by desires that would lead us astray from reason and virtue. It is the discipline of the citadel's inhabitants, ensuring internal harmony. These four virtues, Marcus argues, are the only true good. They are the only things that truly contribute to our flourishing and happiness because they are entirely within our control and perfect our rational nature. In stark contrast, he places the indifference. These include things like health, wealth, reputation, pleasure, pain, sickness, poverty, life, and death. Why are they called indifferent? Because for the Stoic, they are neither good nor bad in themselves. Possessing wealth does not make you a good person, nor does poverty make you bad. Health is not inherently virtuous, nor is sickness inherently vicious. They do not add to or subtract from our moral character, which is the only true good. However, the Stoics weren't entirely cold to human experience. They introduced a further distinction. Preferred indifference and dispreferred indifference. It is natural and rational to prefer health over sickness, wealth over poverty, pleasure over pain. There's nothing wrong with pursuing preferred indifference, as long as we do so virtuously and without believing them to be essential for our happiness or good character. The moment we attach our inner peace or sense of worth to an indifferent, we surrender our inner citadel to external fortune. we become slaves to things outside our control. Marcus learned to accept illness, loss, and the caprices of fortune without allowing them to disturb his rational faculty, knowing they were dispreferred but not truly bad. The inner citadel acknowledges the distinction, but never relies on indifference for its strength. A crucial aspect of fortifying this inner citadel is the relentless examination of one's own motivations and intentions. Marcus frequently turns his gaze inward, asking himself why he is doing something. What is the true impulse behind his actions? Is it for external praise, for personal gain? Or is it purely out of a sense of duty, justice, and alignment with reason? He understands that even an outwardly virtuous action, if motivated by vanity or a desire for reward, diminishes the integrity of the inner citadel. The true Stoic acts virtuously for virtue's sake, because it is the rational thing to do, because it perfects the self. This commitment to purity of intention ensures that the citadel's foundations are not built on shifting sands of external approval, but on the solid rock of internal integrity. Let's bring this to life with some historical anecdotes that illuminate the immense practical demands of this philosophy. Marcus Aurelius faced immense personal and political adversity. One of the most significant challenges was the revolt of Avidius Cassius in 175 AD. Cassius was a highly decorated general, governor of Syria, and a trusted friend who, believing Marcus was dying, declared himself emperor. This was a profound betrayal, threatening civil war and the stability of the entire empire. How did Marcus respond? With an extraordinary display of the inner citadel's strength. He did not immediately seek revenge, nor did he allow himself to be consumed by anger or fear. Instead, he maintained his philosophical composure, delivering a speech to his troops offering clemency to Cassius's supporters and expressing regret for Cassius's fate. When Cassius was ultimately assassinated by his own officers, Marcus forbade the persecution of his family and ordered his letters burned, demonstrating both justice and temperance. He mourned the loss of a friend, but refused to let personal bitterness or political turmoil corrupt his reason or his commitment to merciful rule. This was courage in the face of betrayal, justice in the face of treason, and temperance in the face of power. His inner citadel remained unbreached. Equally poignant, and perhaps even more personally devastating, was the loss of multiple children throughout his life. Marcus married Faustina the Younger, and they had at least 13 children, many of whom died young. The historical records are sparse on his direct emotional expressions regarding these losses, but the meditations are replete with reflections on the ephemeral nature of life, the acceptance of death as a natural process, and the importance of not being disturbed by things outside one's control. He constantly reminds himself that death is a part of life, a change, not an evil. When reflecting on the death of a loved one, he would likely have applied the same principles. The loss of a child is a dispreferred indifferent, a natural event. The grief is an impression. The suffering comes from the judgment that this event is inherently bad or that it should not have happened. His practice was to acknowledge the pain, but not to let it overwhelm his reason or prevent him from fulfilling his duties. This is a profound example of temperance and courage, of maintaining the inner citadel even when personal tragedy threatened to shatter it. And indeed, the very act of writing meditations itself serves as a powerful testament to the ongoing exercise of fortifying the inner citadel. These weren't intended for publication. They were private reflections, self-admonitions, and philosophical exercises written often late at night in military camps on campaign. He was, in essence, dialoguing with himself, reviewing his principles, challenging his own judgments, and reaffirming his commitment to the Stoic way of life. Each entry, each fragmented thought was a brick laid, a wall reinforced, a gate secured in his personal fortress of reason. It was an active, moment-by-moment practice of bringing his mind back to what was truly in his control, amidst the chaos of empire and the uncertainty of existence. Now it's important to acknowledge that such a radical emphasis on self-control and the impregnability of the inner citadel has not been without its critics. Does such a philosophy lead to emotional repression or an unhealthy detachment from human connection? This is a significant counterargument often leveled against Stoicism. Critics like Friedrich Nietzsche, for instance, famously derided Stoicism as a self-mutilation, an ascetic negation of natural human instincts, passions, and the vital, affirmative forces of life. Nietzsche saw Stoicism as a philosophy of weakness, an attempt to escape the messy, painful, yet ultimately enriching aspects of human existence by intellectualizing them away. For him, the Stoic ideal of apatheia, freedom from disturbing passions, was not a sign of strength, but a denial of our fundamental nature, a retreat from the full spectrum of human experience. He argued that truly great individuals embrace their passions, even their suffering, and transform them into creative energy rather than attempting to transcend or suppress them. This criticism raises a vital question. Is the Stoic goal to not feel emotions or to master them? A careful reading of Marcus, and indeed most Stoics, suggests the latter. The aim isn't to become an unfeeling automaton, devoid of joy or sorrow. It's to prevent emotions from becoming irrational, destructive forces that dictate our actions and corrupt our reason. When Marcus experiences grief, he isn't trying to repress the initial pang of loss. He is trying to prevent that pang from morphing into prolonged despair or self-pity, which would prevent him from fulfilling his duties and living virtuously. The Stoics recognized that initial impressions, including emotional reactions, are natural and involuntary. It's the assent we give to them, the prolonged dwelling on negative judgments, that leads to unhealthy passions. So it's less about repression and more about intelligent emotional management, a distinction that modern psychology, particularly in areas like emotional intelligence, is now recognizing as crucial for well-being. Another powerful counterargument, one that resonates deeply with our human experience, is the challenge of truly being indifferent to profound pain or loss. While Marcus urges himself to view the death of a child as a dispreferred indifferent, how many of us can truly maintain that rational detachment in the face of such devastating personal tragedy? Is it truly possible or even desirable to strip away all subjective emotional resonance from events like acute physical pain, the suffering of loved ones, or the annihilation of one's reputation? The Stoic response acknowledges the difficulty. They don't claim it's easy or that the pain itself isn't felt, but they argue that the suffering, the prolonged, destructive emotional turmoil, is often exacerbated by our judgments about the pain or loss. The pain itself is a physical impression. Our emotional suffering arises when we judge it as unbearable, unjust, or the worst thing that could happen. The Stoic aims to accept the reality of the impression, this hurts, without adding the further judgment that it's bad in a way that compromises virtue. This allows them to endure, to maintain their inner equilibrium, and to act virtuously despite the pain, rather than being paralyzed by it. It's about protecting the citadel, not pretending the siege isn't happening. To further contextualize Marcus's ideas, it's helpful to cross-reference them with other philosophical and psychological concepts. The most direct and undeniable influence on Marcus, as mentioned earlier, is the philosopher Epictetus. Epictetus's entire philosophy revolves around the fundamental dichotomy of control, the clear distinction between things that are within our power and things that are not. For Epictetus, our opinions, our impulses, our desires, and our aversions, these are entirely within our control. Our body, our possessions, our reputation, our station in life, and even life itself, these are outside our control. Marcus absorbed this teaching deeply, making it the very blueprint for his inner citadel. To constantly remind oneself of this dichotomy is to know exactly where the boundaries of one's fortress lie and what needs to be defended versus what needs to be accepted. Epictetus taught that true freedom and happiness come from focusing solely on what is in our control and cultivating indifference to everything else. This is the very foundation of Marcus's self-mastery. Looking at more modern ideas, we can draw fascinating parallels with contemporary psychological concepts like mindfulness and emotional intelligence. Mindfulness, in its core practice, involves observing one's thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without judgment, allowing them to arise and pass without getting entangled in them. This mirrors the Stoic practice of examining impressions without immediately granting them assent. To observe an annoying thought without labeling it as bad or immediately reacting to it is a deeply Stoic exercise. It's about creating a space between the impression and the reaction, a space where reason can intervene. Similarly, emotional intelligence, the capacity to understand and manage one's own emotions and to understand and influence the emotions of others, finds a powerful precursor in Stoicism. Marcus's constant self-scrutiny and his efforts to manage his anger, fear, and frustration are direct attempts at what we would now call intrapersonal emotional intelligence. His understanding that emotions stem from judgments and that these judgments can be reasoned with offers a robust framework for emotional self-regulation. While modern emotional intelligence might emphasize expressing emotions healthily, Stoicism provides a vital method for preventing those emotions from becoming overwhelming or destructive in the first place, thus preserving the sanctity of the inner citadel. Finally, though vastly different in aim and method, we can briefly allude to René Descartes' meditations on first philosophy. Centuries after Marcus, Descartes also penned a series of meditations, a profound exercise in philosophical introspection. However, while Marcus's meditations are an ethical manual for self-governance and cultivating virtue in a chaotic world, Descartes' work is an epistemological quest for certainty, tearing down all previous beliefs to find an unshakable foundation for knowledge. Both works are deeply personal journeys of the mind, written in a meditative style, but their ultimate concerns diverge dramatically. One seeks inner peace and moral excellence, the other, absolute certainty and truth. Yet they both underscore the enduring power of solitary introspection as a tool for profound philosophical insight and self-discovery. The inner citadel is thus more than a metaphor. It's a profound invitation to self-awareness and self-mastery. It challenges us to reclaim sovereignty over our own minds, to understand that while we cannot control the world around us, we possess absolute dominion over our judgments, our responses, and ultimately our character. It is a constant, lifelong practice of vigilance, wisdom, and courage, aimed at ensuring that no external event, no fleeting impression, can ever truly disturb the peace and integrity of our innermost being. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, built his fortress not of stone, but of reason, and in doing so, offered us a timeless blueprint for cultivating an unshakable tranquility in a turbulent world. One of the most profound and actionable imperatives within Marcus Aurelius's meditations is the call to live in accordance with nature. This isn't just a quaint philosophical maxim. It's the very bedrock of his ethical system, a guiding principle that permeates every reflection, every piece of advice he offers himself. But what does it truly mean to live in accordance with nature? For Marcus, this seemingly simple phrase holds a dual, deeply interconnected meaning, simultaneously grounding us in our humanity and elevating our perspective to the cosmic. On one hand, it means aligning ourselves with our human nature, and what is the defining characteristic of humanity for Marcus and the Stoics? It is our capacity for reason, our rationality. We are, as Marcus often reminds himself, rational animals. Unlike other creatures driven solely by instinct or appetite, we possess the unique faculty to deliberate, to choose, to understand, and to organize our thoughts and actions according to principles. To live in accordance with this aspect of our nature, then, is to exercise our reason fully and virtuously. It means cultivating wisdom, temperance, courage, and, crucially, justice in all our dealings. It means acting with deliberate thought, rather than succumbing to unexamined impulses, fleeting emotions, or the tyranny of external circumstances. Our reason is our inner citadel, our most powerful tool, and to neglect it is to live against the very essence of who we are. This understanding of human nature also emphasizes our inherent sociality. We are not solitary islands, but parts of a larger whole. Marcus frequently echoes the Aristotelian idea, perhaps implicitly, that man is a zoon politican, a political animal designed for community. Aristotle, centuries before Marcus, argued that humans find their flourishing, their eudaimonia, not in isolation, but in the context of a polis, a community where they can engage in civic life and contribute to the common good. For Marcus, this social imperative is even more expansive, stretching beyond the boundaries of any single city or empire. Our rationality naturally compels us towards connection, toward cooperation, toward mutual support. To act selfishly, to harbor ill will, to retreat into purely individual concerns, is to violate this fundamental aspect of our design. It is like a hand trying to function without the body, or a limb severing itself from the organism. Such actions are unnatural because they contradict our essential nature as rational, communal beings. Our highest function, our most natural expression, is to contribute to the well-being of the whole. But the phrase living in accordance with nature extends far beyond merely understanding our individual human essence. It also compels us to align with cosmic nature, with the universal logos, the rational principle that orders and governs the entire universe. For the Stoics, the cosmos is not a chaotic jumble of events, but an exquisitely ordered living entity imbued with an immanent rationality, the logos. This logos is, in a sense, the mind of the universe, a divine intelligence that directs all things according to a predetermined, benevolent, and ultimately perfect plan. Every event, every twist of fate, every challenge, and every joy is a necessary thread in the vast tapestry woven by this cosmic reason. This leads us directly to the concept of determinism within Stoicism. If the universe is governed by a rational logos, then everything that happens is predetermined, part of an unbroken chain of cause and effect. This can sound daunting, even disempowering to modern ears, implying a lack of free will. However, for Marcus and the Stoics, this determinism was not meant to induce resignation or apathy. Instead, it was an invitation to understanding and acceptance. Our freedom, they argued, lies not in changing the grand cosmic script, for that is beyond our power, but in our attitude towards it. It lies in our ability to assent to what happens, to embrace it, and to align our internal will with the external will of the Logos. When we understand that everything unfolds according to a rational and good design, even events that seem catastrophic to our limited perspective, we can achieve an inner tranquility, a state of apathy and not of indifference, but of freedom from disturbance. We participate in the Logos not by opposing it, but by understanding and accepting its workings. This dual understanding, aligning with our rational, social human nature and with the rational, ordered cosmic nature, forms the foundation for Marcus's profound sense of duty, or officium in Latin. Duty for Marcus is not a burden or a mere social obligation. It is the natural consequence of being a rational, social being situated within a rational, ordered cosmos. His duty extended far beyond his immediate family or the demands of the Roman Empire. It encompassed a deep commitment to all of humanity, a concept the Stoics called philanthropia. Marcus saw all rational beings as interconnected, not just metaphorically, but as literal parts of a single, universal community, a cosmic city. He writes, "My city and country, as a rational being, is the world." This perspective means that our individual good is inseparable from the common good. We are all limbs of the same body, and just as a hand cannot thrive in isolation from the arm, nor the arm from the body, an individual cannot truly flourish by pursuing self-interest at the expense of others. Our individual purpose, our telos, is to contribute to the harmony and welfare of this universal community. This isn't altruism in the modern sense of self-sacrifice. It's a recognition that by acting justly and beneficently towards others, we are, in fact, acting in accordance with our own deepest nature and thereby fulfilling our own true self-interest. This conviction shaped Marcus's approach to his imperial duties. History remembers him as the philosopher-emperor, a man who, despite his longing for a simpler life of philosophical study and contemplation, bore the immense burdens of his office with unwavering commitment. He faced ceaseless wars on the frontiers, a devastating plague that swept through the empire, and the constant administrative demands of governing an expansive realm. Yet, he never shirked his responsibilities. He saw his role not as a privilege but as a service, a duty imposed by the Logos, a call to contribute to the common welfare on the grandest possible scale. This commitment is a powerful example of living in accordance with nature, embracing the difficult circumstances fate presented him, and diligently applying his reason and social virtues to serve the greater good. His administrative reforms, his genuine efforts to improve the lives of his subjects even during times of immense crisis, are historical anecdotes that underscore this deep-seated sense of duty. He cared about the availability of food, the fairness of justice, the stability of the economy, because these were all aspects of ensuring the common good of the cosmic city over which he presided. The Roman emphasis on virtues, virtue, excellence, courage, and pietas, duty, devotion to family, country, and gods, deeply resonated with Marcus's Stoic philosophy. While pietas traditionally referred to specific societal and religious duties, Marcus expanded its scope to cosmic duty, a devotion to the rational order of the universe and the well-being of all its rational inhabitants. Virtues, for him, was the excellence of character that allowed one to fulfill these duties with unwavering resolve and integrity. This brings us to the concept of the cosmic perspective, one of Marcus's most potent mental tools. Imagine, he urges, viewing yourself and your problems not from your limited earthbound vantage point, but from a vast distance, from the stars, from the expanse of time. What does your petty grievance, your momentary frustration, your attachment to a fleeting pleasure, or an insignificant possession look like from that immense height? It shrinks into utter insignificance. The cosmic perspective fosters humility, reminding us of our small place in the grand scheme of things. It allows us to detach from the urgency and intensity of immediate worldly matters, reducing anxiety and freeing us from the tyranny of trivial concerns. When you contemplate the infinite cycles of generation and decay, the fleeting nature of all human life and achievement, the things that once seemed so important lose their grip on your mind. Marcus constantly employed this technique to put his own suffering and the travails of his reign into perspective. Facing death, plague, or rebellion, he could step back and see them as natural occurrences in the unfolding of the cosmic drama, rather than personal injustices. This isn't about denial or emotional suppression, but about reframing. It's about recognizing that while we experience events intensely in the present, they are but tiny ripples in the ocean of eternity. This perspective allowed him to maintain his composure, his rationality, and his unwavering commitment to duty, even amidst chaos. A direct consequence of living in accordance with both human and cosmic nature is the paramount importance of justice, fairness, and contributing to the common welfare. Justice for Marcus is not merely a legalistic concept but a fundamental virtue, an outflow of our rational and social nature. It demands that we treat others fairly, that we do not exploit them, and that we contribute actively to the well-being of the whole, even when it is personally inconvenient. In fact, especially when it is personally inconvenient, he frequently reminds himself that what is good for the beehive is good for the bee. Our actions should always be geared towards the communal good, avoiding self-serving motives or actions that undermine the harmony of the larger system. This applies to every interaction, from the smallest daily courtesy to the grandest imperial decree. To act justly is to act rationally, and therefore naturally. This commitment to the common good is a stark reminder that Stoicism is not an escapist philosophy that retreats from the world. On the contrary, it demands active engagement and participation, but always guided by reason and a deep sense of universal duty. Marcus's philosophical journey was not a retreat to an ivory tower, but a constant effort to apply these principles amidst the highest stakes and most pressing demands of the Roman world. This profound acceptance of cosmic order culminates in one of the most powerful and distinctive Stoic ideas, amor fati, the love of fate. This isn't mere resignation or passive endurance of whatever life throws our way. It's an active, joyful affirmation of everything that happens, seeing it all as a necessary and perfect part of the grand, rational design of the cosmos. To love fate means to not wish things were otherwise, to embrace even perceived misfortunes as opportunities for virtue, as essential components of our unique journey. When we fully grasp that the Logos governs all and that the Logos is good, then every event, every obstacle, every person we encounter serves a purpose in our development and in the unfolding of the universal plan. Marcus frequently circles back to this idea, reminding himself that whatever happens, happens for the common good of the universe. Even what seems like a personal calamity is, from the cosmic perspective, a necessary part of the whole, like a single thread in a vast tapestry that, viewed up close, might appear ugly or out of place, but contributes to the overall beauty and integrity of the complete design. By cultivating amor fati, we eliminate the root cause of much human suffering, the conflict between our desires and reality. We learn to want what happens, to will what is, and in doing so, we achieve an unparalleled inner peace and resilience. This is a profound shift from merely accepting to actively loving, transforming potential adversity into an integral part of our flourishing. Now, as compelling as this framework is, it's crucial to subject it to critical scrutiny, as any robust philosophy deserves. Let's consider some significant counterarguments. Firstly, is living in accordance with nature too vague or open to interpretation to provide clear ethical guidance? What exactly does nature dictate? Different people, even in Marcus's time, might have understood human nature or cosmic nature very differently. Could this vagueness lead to conflicting moral injunctions? For instance, some might argue that human nature is inherently competitive and self-interested, leading to an entirely different set of ethical conclusions than Marcus's emphasis on sociality and cooperation. A strict interpretation of natural law has, throughout history, been used to justify everything from social hierarchies to specific gender roles, often reflecting the biases of the interpreter rather than an objective truth. If nature is our guide, but we can't agree on what nature is or what it wants, then the foundation for ethics becomes shaky. Marcus assumes a shared understanding of reason and sociality, but this isn't universally accepted. How do we objectively determine what our natural inclinations are, separate from cultural conditioning or individual desires? Secondly, does Marcus's emphasis on determinism and amor fati risk leading to quietism or a passive acceptance of injustice, rather than active resistance? If everything is part of the grand, rational design of the cosmos, does it diminish the impetus to fight for change, to challenge oppressive systems, or to actively work against what appears to be wrong? A Marxist critique, for example, might argue that Stoic philosophy, with its call for acceptance of one's place and circumstances, can be seen as an ideology that pacifies the oppressed, encouraging them to endure exploitation rather than to rise up and demand justice. If all events, including social injustice, are part of the divine logos, then why bother with revolution or radical social reform? Why not simply accept the status quo? While Marcus himself, through his imperial actions, clearly demonstrated a commitment to improving his subjects' lives and upholding justice, his philosophy could, in less active hands, be interpreted as a call for quiet resignation. He might argue that justice is living in accordance with nature, and therefore fighting injustice is a duty, but the line between accepting what is and actively working to change what is perceived as wrong can become blurred under the weight of cosmic determinism. How do we reconcile the idea of loving fate with the imperative to fix what is broken in the world? Marcus would likely respond by saying that the Logos provides us with the rational capacity to discern injustice and the moral agency to act against it. Our capacity to reason is our participation in the Logos, and that reason compels us to seek justice. So, while fate determines what happens, our response to it, our internal disposition and external actions, are within our power and are determined by our virtue. This leads directly to the third counterargument: does determinism diminish individual moral agency? If everything is predetermined, if the cosmic Logos has already charted every course, then what room is left for free will, for genuine moral choice? Does it make our efforts towards virtue meaningless if our actions are merely the unfolding of a pre-written script? This is a perennial problem in philosophy, often called the problem of free will versus determinism. For Marcus, the Stoics carefully distinguished between what is within our control and what is not. What is not in our control are external events, the circumstances of our birth, health, wealth, reputation, and ultimately, death. What is in our control are our judgments, our desires, our aversions, and our actions, our internal responses to external events. The Stoic answer to the moral agency question is that while external events are fated, our assent to those events, our internal reactions, and our choices about how to act within those events are free. We are not automatons, we are rational agents who, by exercising our reason, can choose to align our will with the Logos or to struggle against it. The Logos doesn't force us to be virtuous. It provides the framework and the rational capacity for us to choose virtue. Our moral agency lies precisely in this choice: to be rational or irrational, to be social or selfish, to accept fate with equanimity or to resist it with futile anger. The effort required to cultivate virtue is therefore not meaningless. It is the very act of exercising our uniquely human freedom within the cosmic design. We are not simply puppets. We are conscious participants in the unfolding of the rational universe, and our choices, while part of the larger whole, are genuinely ours. To deepen our understanding, let's briefly cross-reference Marcus's ideas with other significant philosophical figures. We already touched upon Aristotle's Zoon Politikon, which resonates strongly with Marcus's emphasis on human sociality and community. Both thinkers understood human flourishing as inherently tied to living in a community and contributing to its well-being. However, Aristotle's focus was often on the specific political structures of the polis, while Marcus broadened this to a universal cosmic city, encompassing all rational beings. Aristotle's ethics were more teleological, focused on achieving eudaimonia through the development of virtues, whereas Stoicism, while also virtue-centric, grounded its ethics more explicitly in an overarching cosmic rationality and determinism. Now let's contrast Marcus with Immanuel Kant's duty-based ethics, particularly his categorical imperative. At first glance, there seem to be striking similarities. Both philosophies emphasize duty, rationality, and universal principles. Kant's categorical imperative demands that we act only according to maxims that we could universalize, effectively treating all rational beings as ends in themselves, never merely as means. This resonates with Marcus's idea of a cosmic city where all rational beings are interconnected and deserve respect. Both would agree that moral action springs from a sense of duty, not from inclination or desire. However, the motivations differ significantly. For Kant, duty is derived from pure practical reason, a self-legislating will that transcends empirical experience. The moral law is autonomous, springing from within the rational agent, independent of any external authority, even God. For Marcus, duty is derived from aligning our individual reason with the external universal Logos, the preordained rational order of the cosmos. While both emphasize reason, Kant's reason is legislative, constructing the moral law, whereas Marcus's reason is interpretive, discovering and conforming to an already existing cosmic law. Furthermore, Kant places supreme emphasis on the goodwill and the pure motive of duty, whereas Marcus, while valuing intention, also emphasizes the acceptance of external events as part of the Logos, something Kant would likely separate more sharply from the realm of moral deliberation. For Kant, moral responsibility rests solely on the will's intention, irrespective of outcome, whereas for Marcus, the acceptance of outcomes is central to ethical living. Finally, we can briefly touch upon Baruch Spinoza's ethics of understanding and accepting the order of nature. Spinoza, a rationalist philosopher of the 17th century, developed a highly deterministic system where God, or nature, is an infinite, self-caused substance, and everything that exists is a mode or attribute of this substance. For Spinoza, true freedom lies not in breaking free from causality, but in understanding the necessary order of the universe and aligning our intellect and desires with it. When we grasp the interconnectedness of all things and see them as flowing necessarily from the essence of God/nature, our emotional disturbances lessen, and we achieve a form of intellectual love of God, amor intellectualis Dei. This bears a remarkable resemblance to Marcus's amor fati and his understanding of the Logos. Both Spinoza and Marcus advocate for intellectual assent and emotional acceptance of the natural order as the path to tranquility and human flourishing. Where they diverge might be in the specifics of their metaphysics. Spinoza's system is a monism where God is nature, while Stoicism sees the Logos as an immanent, rational principle within nature, often anthropomorphized as a divine force. Yet the core ethical outcome, a profound peace derived from understanding and accepting the world as it is strikingly similar. In conclusion, living in accordance with nature for Marcus Aurelius is a rich, multifaceted imperative. It demands rigorous self-examination to align with our rational, social human nature, and an expansive perspective to embrace the deterministic, rational order of the cosmic nature. It is a call to profound duty officium, not just to immediate circles but to philanthropia, to all of humanity as part of a single cosmic city. This perspective, cultivated through mental exercises like the cosmic viewpoint, fosters humility, reduces anxiety, and liberates us from the tyranny of trivial concerns. It underpins his unwavering commitment to justice, fairness, and contributing to the common welfare, even when personally inconvenient. Ultimately, it leads to the radical embrace of amor fati, the love of fate, transforming mere acceptance into a joyful affirmation of all that unfolds within the grand design of the universe. While challenges arise concerning its potential vagueness, quietism, or the impact on moral agency, Marcus's philosophy, when thoroughly explored, offers potent responses that defend the active, engaged, and deeply ethical life it advocates. His meditations are not a call to passive retreat, but a powerful manual for living virtuously and purposefully in the heart of an often turbulent world, always guided by the twin lights of reason and cosmic understanding. We've explored how Marcus Aurelius sought inner tranquility by understanding himself and his place in the cosmos. But Stoicism, as practiced by the emperor, was never a philosophy for the faint of heart, nor for those who wished to gloss over the harsh realities of existence. Instead, Marcus plunged headfirst into the most uncomfortable truths, dissecting them not to induce despair, but to forge an unparalleled resilience. This is where he confronts adversity, mortality, and the relentless tide of transience, an unflinching engagement with suffering, loss, and death that forms the very bedrock of his path to an unshakable inner peace. At the heart of Marcus's philosophy, pulsating with a quiet yet insistent rhythm, is the principle of memento mori. Remember, you must die. This wasn't some morbid obsession, but a foundational truth, a stark reminder intended to sharpen focus and ignite urgency. He returns to it again and again like a refrain in a sacred chant, not to paralyze but to liberate. You could leave life right now, he writes in one of his most arresting passages. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Think about the visceral power of that statement. It slices through procrastination, through trivial concerns, through petty grievances. If this breath, this moment could be your last, what would truly matter? Marcus wasn't merely intellectualizing death, he was living with its constant shadow. His health was often precarious, a chronic cough, stomach ailments, and constant fatigue likely accompanying him on his campaigns. He knew what it meant to feel the fragile thread of life. For him, memento mori wasn't a concept to be considered in quiet contemplation, but a daily, practical tool. It was the ultimate deadline, stripping away everything inessential and leaving only what is truly within our power, our character, our choices, our judgments. It underscores the urgency of virtue. If time is so brief, then every moment must be dedicated to living rationally, justly, and courageously. And it's not just our own individual mortality that Marcus contemplates. He widens his lens to encompass the fleeting nature of all human existence, of fame, and of material possessions. In perhaps his most comprehensive and poignant summary of this theme, he writes, "Of the life of man, its duration is but a point, its substance flowing, its perception dim, the fabric of the entire body perishable, the soul an unquiet eddy, fortune dark, and fame uncertain. In a word, all that belongs to the body is a stream, and all that belongs to the soul a dream and a vapor, life a warfare and a sojourning in a strange land, and after fame oblivion." Just pause for a moment to absorb the profound sweep of that statement. Its duration is but a point. Our lives are not a grand narrative stretching into infinity, but a flicker, a momentary spark in the vastness of cosmic time. Its substance flowing, echoing the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus and his famous dictum, Pantarei, all things flow. Nothing is static, nothing truly endures. Our bodies are perishable, our souls an unquiet eddy, a restless current. And even our most coveted external achievements, fortune dark and fame uncertain, they are illusions, easily snatched away by fate or swallowed by afterfame oblivion. Marcus returns to this theme repeatedly, observing how even the most celebrated figures of history, Alexander, Caesar, Pompey, these titans who shaped empires, are ultimately reduced to names, whispered by a few, forgotten by most. Their monuments crumble, their legacies fade, their very existence becomes a mere footnote in the annals of a universe that cares little for human ambition. He asks, what profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Echoing the weary wisdom of the book of Ecclesiastes, which similarly laments vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Both texts, separated by centuries and cultures, arrive at a strikingly similar conclusion about the futility of worldly pursuits. Yet, where Ecclesiastes often settles into a tone of resigned melancholy, Marcus uses this recognition of transience as a springboard for ethical action. It's not about despairing at the vanity, but understanding where true value lies. This concept of panta of universal impermanence, is not limited to individuals or their fleeting fame. Marcus sees it as the fundamental law governing everything. Time is a river, he muses, a violent current of events. No sooner does anything appear than it is swept away, and another comes in its place and will be swept away too. Think about that image. A relentless, unstoppable river. Not just people, but empires, cities, mountains, even the stars in their cosmic cycles are subject to this ceaseless flow. What we consider solid, fixed, eternal, is merely a longer moment in the grand cosmic dance of creation and dissolution. This deep understanding of impermanence resonates powerfully with ancient Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhism. The Buddhist concept of anicca, or impermanence, is one of the three marks of existence, asserting that all conditioned phenomena are transient. Just like Marcus, Buddhists recognize that attachment to transient things inevitably leads to dukkha, or suffering. The path to liberation in both traditions involves a radical acceptance of this truth. While Stoicism emphasizes reason and virtue within a providentially ordered cosmos, and Buddhism focuses on non-attachment and the cessation of craving through insight, both systems offer a powerful framework for finding peace in a world defined by change. They both guide us away from the futile effort of clinging to what cannot be held. So, how does one cultivate resilience in the face of such overwhelming impermanence and the omnipresent threat of adversity? This is where Marcus brings us back to the core Stoic doctrine. External events are indifferent. Our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our judgments about what happens. This is arguably the most radical and liberating aspect of Stoicism. Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed, he declares. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. This is not a denial of pain, let me be clear. A broken bone still hurts, a lost loved one still grieves. Stoicism doesn't ask us to be emotionless robots. Instead, it asks us to distinguish between the event itself and our interpretation of that event. It asks us to recognize that while we cannot control external circumstances, we always retain control over our assent, our judgments, and our reactions. If you're pained by any external thing, Marcus advises, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it, and it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now. Consider Marcus's own life. He wasn't some philosopher king ensconced in an ivory tower. He was a man steeped in the brutal realities of power, politics, and war. He experienced immense personal suffering. He lost at least 5, possibly 8 of his children in their youth. Imagine the crushing grief, the repeated blows to a parent's heart. How did he process these losses through a Stoic lens? He acknowledged the pain, no doubt. But he would have viewed the death of a child as a natural, albeit tragic, event, part of the cosmic order. His suffering, he would argue, came not from the fact of death, but from his judgment that it was inherently evil or unjust. By refusing to add this moral judgment, by accepting it as part of nature, he sought to prevent that grief from poisoning his soul and incapacitating him from his duties. And then there was the Antonine Plague, also known as the Great Plague of Galen, which ravaged the Roman Empire during his reign. It was a pandemic of unprecedented scale, sweeping across the empire, likely killing millions, including many within Marcus's own family and inner circle. Imagine being the emperor during such a catastrophe. The constant death toll, the societal breakdown, the immense pressure. How did he lead? He didn't succumb to despair. He applied these very principles. Managing what he could, appointing physicians, implementing quarantines, accepting what he could not, the indifference of the plague itself, and focusing on his duty to the common good. He understood that the plague, like any other external event, was indifferent. It was neither good nor bad in itself, it simply was. His task was to respond with reason, courage, and justice. Similarly, Marcus spent years on Rome's northern frontiers, leading campaigns against Germanic tribes. He lived in constant proximity to death, violence, and uncertainty. This wasn't abstract philosophical contemplation. It was battle-tested Stoicism. He saw countless lives ended abruptly, witnessed immense suffering, yet he maintained his composure and purpose. He understood that warfare, though horrific, was a part of the human condition, an external circumstance. His resilience came from his ability to protect his inner citadel, his judgments, from the chaos surrounding him. This acceptance extends to all forms of change and decay, and the inevitable cycle of birth and death. For Marcus, everything is part of the grand, rational, and benevolent cosmic reason, the Logos. To resist change is to resist nature itself. The universe is change, life is opinion, he writes. Everything that is born must die, everything that begins must end. This continuous flow, this transformation, is not a flaw in the system, but its very essence. Whatever happens, happens as it should. And if you observe carefully, you will find this to be so. This isn't passive fatalism, but an active alignment with the rational order of the universe. To fight it is futile, to accept it is wisdom. This perspective, this being towards death, as a fundamental aspect of human existence, finds an intriguing echo in Martin Heidegger's philosophy. For Heidegger, authentic existence involves confronting one's finitude, understanding death not as an event that happens to us, but as an integral, ever-present possibility that shapes our very being. It is this confrontation with our own inescapable demise that clarifies our choices and defines our authentic self. While both Marcus and Heidegger recognize the centrality of death, their responses differ significantly. Marcus seeks tranquility and virtue through alignment with a cosmic reason. Heidegger emphasizes the individual's radical freedom and responsibility to create meaning in the face of an ultimately meaningless universe. For Marcus, death is a natural process within a rational order. For Heidegger, it's the ultimate limit, forcing us to face our singular, unrepeatable existence. In light of such deep impermanence and the ever-present shadow of mortality, where then should our focus lie? Marcus provides a clear answer: the present moment. The past is gone, unchangeable, and therefore no longer ours. The future is uncertain, beyond our control, and therefore not yet ours. Only the present is truly within our grasp. Never let the future disturb you, he advises. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Dwelling on past regrets or future anxieties is a futile expenditure of precious mental energy, a distraction from the only moment we truly possess. The present is the only thing of which a man can be deprived, if it is true that this is the only thing which he possesses, and that a man cannot lose what he has not. This emphasis on present moment awareness finds a striking parallel in various mindfulness practices, particularly within Buddhist traditions. While the philosophical underpinnings and specific meditation techniques may differ, the shared goal is a profound shift in consciousness. To anchor oneself in the now, to observe thoughts and sensations without judgment, and to release attachment to past narratives or future fantasies. Both Marcus and these traditions understand that this focus on the present is a potent antidote to suffering and a pathway to inner freedom. It allows us to fully engage with life as it unfolds, rather than being constantly pulled away by the currents of our own minds. It is crucial to understand that Marcus's relentless meditations on mortality and transience are not intended to induce despair or nihilism. Quite the opposite. They are a powerful call to action, an urgent plea to live virtuously and rationally in the now. Because life is short and fragile, therefore we must strive to be good, to contribute to the common good, to perfect our character. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, he exhorts. Be one. The brevity of existence is not an argument for futility, but for intensity of purpose. It highlights the preciousness of each moment and the absolute necessity of dedicating it to what truly matters, our moral integrity and our contribution to the cosmic whole. Every moment think steadily as a Roman and a man to do what thou hast in hand with perfect and simple dignity and feeling of affection and freedom and justice, and to give thyself relief from all other thoughts. And thou wilt give thyself relief if thou doest every act of thy life as if it were the last. This is the core message. Your time is finite, so make every action count, make every choice a reflection of your highest self. However, such an unflinching focus on mortality and transience is not without its critics, and it prompts several legitimate counterarguments that bear consideration. Firstly, does a constant focus on death and impermanence risk leading to melancholy, nihilism, or a diminished motivation for long-term projects? For Marcus, the answer is a resounding no. His Stoicism is fundamentally optimistic about human potential for virtue and rationality. He saw the recognition of transience as a liberating force, freeing us from the futile pursuit of external goods and reorienting us towards the only thing truly within our control, our inner character. If all external things, fame, wealth, even life itself, are ultimately indifferent and fleeting, then only the internal remains truly valuable. This isn't a source of despair, but of immense strength and focus. Yet, for someone not steeped in the Stoic worldview, especially a secular individual lacking Marcus's belief in a benevolent cosmic logos, this relentless emphasis on the ephemeral nature of all things could indeed feel profoundly depressing. Without the underlying Stoic framework of duty and virtue within a rational universe, the sheer scale of impermanence could easily tip into nihilism, where nothing ultimately matters, so why bother? It could diminish motivation for grand, long-term human endeavors if their ultimate dissolution is constantly front of mind. A Stoic would respond that the motivation comes not from the outcome of the project, which is indifferent, but from the virtuous effort in its undertaking. The motivation is to act according to reason and duty in the present moment, regardless of the future's certainty. A second common critique asks, does the Stoic perspective make suffering seem trivial? When Marcus says, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed, it can sound dismissive, particularly to those experiencing profound physical or emotional pain. Stoicism is often accused of being cold or unempathetic. However, this misses a crucial nuance. Marcus does not deny the existence of pain or loss. He would readily acknowledge the physical agony of disease or the sorrow of bereavement. What he distinguishes is the physical or emotional sensation from the moral judgment we attach to it, which often amplifies suffering. A Stoic acknowledges the objective fact of a broken limb, but resists the judgment that this broken limb harms his inner self or makes his life inherently bad. The pain is a fact. The despair is a judgment. This perspective requires an extraordinary mental discipline, a profound reframing that is challenging to achieve, especially in the throes of acute suffering. It's not about denying one's feelings, but about mastering them through reason, preventing them from overwhelming one's rational faculty and sense of duty. This point brings us to a compelling comparison with Michel de Montaigne, another profound meditator on death, albeit from a different philosophical lineage. Montaigne, a 16th-century French philosopher, famously quoted Cicero, "To philosophize is to learn how to die," and dedicated much of his essays to this very theme. Yet Montaigne's approach was intensely personal, anecdotal, and embraced the full spectrum of human contradictions and frailties. He didn't seek to systematically conquer the fear of death through rigorous reason, as Marcus did. Instead, he observed it, turned it over in his mind, explored his own fluctuating feelings of anxiety, defiance, and acceptance. He allowed for a certain melancholy, a human dimension of fear and sadness, without feeling the need to extinguish it. While both sought wisdom in the face of mortality, Marcus offered a prescriptive path to inner tranquility. Montaigne offered a descriptive, often contradictory, exploration of what it means to be human in the face of the inevitable. Montaigne valued the self-observation and the acceptance of human emotions, including anxiety, as part of the human condition, rather than solely trying to overcome them with reason. Finally, we must consider the perspective of existentialist philosophers, who also grapple with mortality but arrive at a radically different conclusion. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Simone de Beauvoir acknowledge the finitude of life, the inherent lack of objective meaning, and the absurdity of human existence in a silent universe. However, their response is not one of acceptance and alignment with a cosmic reason. Instead, they emphasize radical freedom, choice, and the imperative to create meaning in a world that offers none. For an existentialist, to passively accept fate or to find meaning solely in aligning with an external logos might be seen as a form of bad faith, an evasion of the terrifying responsibility of forging one's own values and purpose. Marcus would counter that this creation of meaning, if unmoored from universal reason and virtue, could be arbitrary and prone to caprice. For him, meaning is found through discovery and alignment with the rational order. For the existentialist, it is through creation and the courageous embrace of freedom. In essence, Marcus Aurelius's meditations on adversity, mortality, and transience are not a philosophy of gloom or resignation. They are, paradoxically, a philosophy of liberation and empowerment. By relentlessly confronting the harsh realities of life and the inevitability of death, he sought to disarm their power over us. He showed us that our suffering often stems not from the events themselves, but from our judgments about them. He revealed that while we cannot control the flow of the cosmic river, we can control how we navigate its currents. He taught us that because life is fleeting, every single moment becomes an urgent opportunity to live virtuously, rationally, and in service to the common good. It is a demanding philosophy, certainly. It asks us to cultivate a profound detachment from external goods, an unwavering focus on our inner state, and a radical acceptance of the universe's indifferent processes. But for those willing to undertake this path, it promises not an escape from suffering, but a robust resilience in its midst, an inner citadel of tranquility that can withstand the fiercest storms of life and the ultimate certainty of death. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, faced down plagues, wars, and personal tragedy, and in his private reflections, he left us a timeless guide for how to do the same. His meditations remind us that in confronting the uncomfortable truths of our existence, we discover the profound urgency of living, truly living in the now. We've journeyed deep into the pages of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, exploring its core tenets, its practical wisdom, and the profound introspection of an emperor wrestling with the universe. But as with any philosophy that seeks to offer a complete guide to life, Stoicism, and Marcus's personal articulation of it, has not escaped its share of scrutiny and critique. In this final section, we turn to assess its enduring legacy, its most common criticisms, and its remarkable, often surprising, relevance in our modern world. Let's begin by confronting some of the more persistent criticisms leveled against Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius himself. One of the most common accusations is that Stoicism fosters emotional coldness, even repression. Critics often paint a picture of the Stoic sage as an unfeeling automaton, devoid of warmth, empathy, or joy. This perception frequently stems from a misunderstanding of the Stoic concept of apatheia. In ancient Greek, apatheia doesn't mean apathy or indifference in the modern sense of a lack of feeling. Rather, it signifies a state of being free from pathos, from destructive or irrational passions. The Stoics recognized that emotions like grief, anger, fear, and excessive desire are natural human experiences. They weren't advocating for their eradication, but for their mastery through reason. Consider Marcus himself. His meditations are replete with moments of struggle, of grief over loss, of frustration with difficult people, of fear concerning the immense burdens of his office. He doesn't pretend these feelings don't exist. Instead, his philosophy is a constant exercise in observing these emotions, questioning their rational basis, and preventing them from taking root and disrupting his inner tranquility or his virtuous actions. He writes, for instance, "Do not be vexed, do not be angry, do not be sad, so that you do not make a slave of yourself to these things." This isn't a command to suppress, but a call to freedom from their tyranny. The Stoic ideal isn't a heart of stone, but a mind that, even when experiencing pain or sorrow, can still choose to act with wisdom and justice, allowing the emotion to pass without allowing it to dictate behavior or judgment. It's akin to what we might call emotional intelligence today, understanding and regulating one's emotions rather than being a slave to them. Another critique, often historically valid, points to an aristocratic bias within Stoicism. Given that Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, and many other prominent Stoics were men of influence and education, it's easy to see how some might view it as a philosophy for the privileged. The argument suggests that Stoicism, with its emphasis on inner freedom and acceptance of external circumstances, might inadvertently encourage quietism or political passivity, particularly among those suffering under oppressive systems. If external conditions are indifferent and true good resides only in virtue, why fight for systemic change? Why challenge injustice if one's inner peace isn't dependent on external outcomes? However, this criticism simplifies a nuanced reality. While Stoicism certainly appealed to the powerful, it also offered solace and a path to dignity for the disempowered. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic teachers, began his life as a slave. His teachings emphasize that while your body and possessions may be enslaved, your mind, your faculty of judgment, your proherses, remains free. This was a radical idea in a slave society, offering a profound sense of agency to those who had none in the eyes of the world. And while Marcus was an emperor, his Stoicism didn't lead to passivity. On the contrary, it fueled his relentless dedication to his duties, to the welfare of the empire, and to justice. He was constantly engaged in war, administration, and public service, often sacrificing his own comfort and health for the sake of Rome. His philosophy was a tool for effective leadership, not an excuse for inaction. He aimed to improve the world within his sphere of influence, not to simply accept its flaws. The distinction is crucial. One accepts what one cannot change, but one works tirelessly and virtuously on what one can. This leads us to a related critique, the accusation of quietism or political passivity. If the Stoic principle is to accept fate, to differentiate between what is within our control and what is not, does this not lead to a resignation that stifles activism and reform? If the universe is governed by a rational logos and everything happens for a reason, is there any point in striving to alter the course of events? Yet, Marcus's own life unequivocally refutes this. He was anything but passive. He spent much of his reign on the frontiers, leading legions, defending the empire against barbarian incursions, dealing with plagues and internal dissent. His meditations are not a retreat from the world, but a preparation for engagement with it, a constant self-calibration to ensure he could act justly, courageously, and wisely in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The Stoic answer to this is that we are meant to be active participants in the cosmic city, to play our role according to reason and virtue. The acceptance of fate applies to the outcomes of our actions, not to the actions themselves. We are morally obliged to do our best, to act virtuously, to strive for justice, to contribute to the common good. Whether our efforts succeed or fail, whether they are met with praise or condemnation, is ultimately beyond our absolute control. Our duty is in the effort, in the intention, in the alignment of our will with universal reason. Seneca, another prominent Stoic, echoed this, reminding us that we are part of a larger whole and that our duty is to humanity. "What is a good man? One who gives himself to all mankind," he wrote. This is a far cry from passive resignation. Perhaps the most profound philosophical tension within Stoicism, and a frequent source of critique, lies in its deterministic worldview and how it reconciles with the concept of free will and moral responsibility. The Stoics believe that the universe is governed by logos, a rational, providential, and deterministic force. Every event is part of an interconnected chain of cause and effect, an unfolding of fate. If everything is fated, if every action and outcome is predetermined, how can human beings genuinely possess free will? And if we lack free will, how can we be held morally responsible for our choices and actions? This is the classic problem of determinism. The Stoics offered a sophisticated, if sometimes difficult to grasp, solution. They maintain that while external events are indeed determined, our assent to our impressions, our judgments, our attitudes, our reactions is within our control. Imagine a dog tied to a cart. The cart moves and the dog is pulled along. The dog can either resist, struggling and being dragged, or it can choose to run along with the cart. Either way, it goes where the cart goes. The destination is determined, but the manner of its journey, its internal experience, is up to the dog. Similarly, for the Stoics, we are free to choose how we respond to the hand that fate deals us. Our proherses, our moral faculty or faculty of choice, is the only thing that is truly up to us. This distinction preserves moral responsibility. We are not responsible for what happens to us, but we are entirely responsible for how we interpret it, how we judge it, and how we react to it. If we choose to assent to irrational impressions, to indulge in anger or fear, or to make unjust choices, that is our doing, and we are morally culpable. If we choose to align our will with reason, to accept what is beyond our control, and to act virtuously, that is also our choice. This perspective finds echoes in later philosophical thought, notably in Baruch Spinoza, who argued that freedom is not found in acting randomly, but in understanding necessity and aligning oneself with the rational order of the universe. For Spinoza, true freedom is knowledge of necessity, and liberation from the passions comes from this understanding, a very Stoic notion indeed. Having addressed some of the more significant criticisms, let us now trace the remarkable philosophical influence of meditations and Stoicism through the centuries. It's a testament to the power of these ideas that they didn't simply vanish with the decline of the Roman Empire, but rather persisted and re-emerged in different forms, often in unexpected places. The Middle Ages, often seen as a period dominated by Christian theology, might seem an unlikely home for a pagan philosophy like Stoicism. Yet its ideas survived, often subtly, acting as an underground current. One of the most significant conduits for Stoic thought during this era was Anicius Manlius Severinus Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy. Written while Boethius, a high-ranking Roman official, was imprisoned and awaiting execution for treason in the early 6th century, the Consolation is a dialogue between Boethius and Lady Philosophy. While explicitly Christian in its author's background, the work is profoundly infused with Stoic and Platonic themes. It grapples with the problem of evil, the nature of happiness, the role of fortune, and the pursuit of inner good, all through a lens that emphasizes reason, acceptance of external circumstances, and the sovereignty of the inner self, ideas deeply resonant with Stoicism. Boethius's work became one of the most widely read and influential texts of the Middle Ages, effectively transmitting key Stoic concepts to generations of Christian scholars and thinkers, even if they didn't explicitly label them as Stoic. They found common ground in the emphasis on virtue, reason, divine providence, though now redefined as God's will, and the capacity for inner resilience in the face of suffering. With the Renaissance came a renewed interest in classical learning, and with it, a rediscovery of original Stoic texts. Thinkers began to engage directly with the works of Seneca, Epictetus, and eventually Marcus Aurelius. A towering figure of this period who deeply engaged with Stoic thought was Michel de Montaigne. His essays, groundbreaking in their introspective and conversational style, are replete with reflections on the Stoic pursuit of self-mastery, tranquility, and resilience. Montaigne, though ultimately tempering his initial fervent embrace of Stoicism with a more skeptical and relativistic outlook, spent significant time experimenting with Stoic disciplines, seeking to cultivate indifference to pain and misfortune. He admired the Stoics' commitment to understanding and living in accordance with nature, and their emphasis on fortifying the mind against life's inevitable setbacks. He sought to practice at least the first lesson of philosophy, which is to be undisturbed by life's changes. This direct engagement with Stoic texts helped reintroduce these ideas into the mainstream of Western thought after centuries of indirect influence. The subtle impact of Stoicism continued into the Enlightenment, influencing major figures whose philosophies might seem distinct at first glance. We've already touched upon Baruch Spinoza, whose deterministic metaphysics and ethical system bear striking resemblances to Stoic thought. Spinoza's ethics posits a universe governed by a single, all-encompassing substance, God or nature, operating under immutable laws. Human beings achieve freedom, for Spinoza, not by defying these laws, but by understanding them and aligning their intellect with the rational order of the cosmos. Like the Stoics, Spinoza saw emotions as often arising from inadequate ideas, and sought liberation from their tyranny through rational comprehension and acceptance of necessity. His pursuit of intellectual love of God, leading to tranquility, echoes the Stoic sage's serene acceptance of the Logos. Even Immanuel Kant, whose rigorous duty-based ethics is often seen as a unique pinnacle of Enlightenment philosophy, carries a discernible Stoic lineage. Kant's emphasis on acting from a sense of duty, rather than from inclination or emotion, resonates deeply with Stoic virtue. His concept of the categorical imperative, the idea that one should act only according to a maxim that one could at the same time will to become a universal law, calls for a rational consistency that would have appealed to the Stoics. For both Kant and the Stoics, the moral worth of an action lies in the intention, in the goodwill, rather than in the consequences. The Stoic emphasis on reason as the guide to virtue and the paramount importance of internal moral resolve over external outcomes forms a clear historical and conceptual bridge to Kant's profound ethical system. But the influence of Stoicism is far from confined to the annals of history. In our contemporary world, Marcus Aurelius and his philosophy have experienced a remarkable resurgence, finding significant relevance in unexpected domains. One of the most compelling modern connections is the direct mapping of Stoic principles onto the core methodologies of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT is one of the most empirically validated forms of psychotherapy, and its fundamental techniques directly parallel Stoic practices. Consider the Stoic dichotomy of control. The principle that some things are within our power, our judgments, desires, aversions, actions, and some are not, our body, possessions, reputation, external events. This is a cornerstone of CBT, which teaches clients to distinguish between controllable and uncontrollable factors, encouraging them to focus their energy and attention only on what they can actually influence. A patient suffering from anxiety, for example, might be guided to recognize that while they cannot control an upcoming event, like a job interview or a flight, they can control their preparation, their attitude, and their immediate reactions. Even more striking is the direct parallel between Stoic cognitive reframing and CBT's central technique of cognitive restructuring. Epictetus famously stated, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This is the very essence of CBT. The therapy trains individuals to identify their automatic negative thoughts, or cognitive distortions, which are often irrational or unhelpful interpretations of events. Clients learn to challenge these thoughts, to question their validity, and to replace them with more rational, balanced perspectives. Whether it's Marcus reminding himself that a problematic person is simply acting according to their nature, or a CBT patient challenging their catastrophic thinking about a minor setback, the underlying mechanism is identical. Actively disputing and reframing one's internal narrative to align it with reason and reality. The Stoics were practicing cognitive therapy millennia before it had a name. This profound practical applicability has fueled the rise of what's often termed New Stoicism or Modern Stoicism movements. This isn't just an academic interest. It's a vibrant, growing cultural phenomenon with widespread practical applications in self-help, resilience training, and personal development. Online communities dedicated to Stoic philosophy flourish, countless books and podcasts translate ancient wisdom into contemporary language, and leaders in business, sports, and even the military openly embrace Stoic principles for enhancing focus, composure, and decision-making under pressure. Examples abound: entrepreneurs applying the premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils, to anticipate risks and prepare for setbacks. Athletes using the dichotomy of control to focus on their training and performance, letting go of outcome anxiety. Individuals coping with personal tragedy by internalizing the Stoic wisdom on acceptance and finding meaning in adversity. The philosophy is no longer confined to dusty academic texts, but is actively being applied as a toolkit for navigating the complexities and challenges of modern life, offering a sense of agency and calm in an increasingly chaotic world. However, applying ancient Stoicism to contemporary life is not without its challenges. The ancient world was vastly different from ours in terms of social structures, scientific understanding, and prevailing ethical norms. Concepts like the natural hierarchy, the acceptance of slavery, or the limited scientific understanding of the cosmos are difficult to reconcile directly with modern democratic, egalitarian, and scientific sensibilities. For instance, the Stoic concept of indifference, that things like wealth, health, and social status are neither good nor bad in themselves, but merely preferred or dispreferred, can clash with modern humanitarian values that emphasize the importance of alleviating poverty, ensuring health care, or fighting for social justice. While a Stoic would argue that working towards these things can be a virtuous action, the intrinsic indifference of the outcomes can be a tough pill to swallow for those committed to systemic change. This leads us to what some might call the Stoic paradox. How can one strive for inner tranquility and acceptance of what is, while simultaneously being actively engaged and effective in a complex, often chaotic world? Doesn't the pursuit of inner peace risk detaching one from the urgency of external problems? Yet, as we've seen with Marcus Aurelius himself, this is not a paradox for the Stoic. On the contrary, inner tranquility is presented as the enabler of effective action. By freeing oneself from emotional turbulence, from excessive fear, anxiety, anger, or ambition, one gains clarity of thought, resilience in the face of setbacks, and the ability to make rational decisions unclouded by passion. The Stoic isn't retreating from the world, but engaging with it from a position of strength and clarity. The calm mind, far from being inactive, is the one best equipped to act decisively and virtuously. Marcus, the philosopher emperor, epitomizes this, demonstrating that a deep interior life can profoundly inform and empower a life of active public service. Despite its enduring appeal and modern relevance, contemporary Stoicism also faces its own set of counterarguments and critiques. One significant concern is that modern Stoicism, in its popular manifestation as a self-help movement, risks becoming an overly simplified fad, lacking the philosophical depth and rigor of its ancient roots. Critics argue that by distilling Stoicism down to a few catchy maxims like control what you can, ignore what you can't, it strips away the intricate cosmological framework, the sophisticated logic, and the holistic ethical system that originally underpinned the philosophy. What remains, they contend, is a collection of life hacks or psychological tricks, divorced from the rich intellectual tradition that gave them meaning. This simplification can lead to a superficial understanding, where individuals might adopt Stoic practices without truly grasping the underlying principles of a universe governed by logos, the nature of virtue as the sole good, or the broader implications of living in harmony with nature. Furthermore, ancient Stoicism, particularly its determinism and the concept of indifference, can be seen as fundamentally incompatible with certain modern ethical, religious, and political philosophies. From a Christian perspective, for example, Stoicism's emphasis on self-sufficiency and reason can clash with the Christian reliance on divine grace, faith, and the will of God. While both philosophies value virtue, the Stoic apatheia, freedom from irrational passions, can be misconstrued as repressing virtues like compassion, empathy, or even divine love. Moreover, the Christian tradition often finds redemptive value in suffering, viewing it as a path to spiritual growth or a way to identify with Christ's sacrifice, which differs significantly from the Stoics' goal of enduring suffering as an indifferent to maintain inner tranquility. A Stoic might see suffering as an opportunity to practice virtue, but not necessarily as inherently redemptive in a spiritual sense. Another powerful critique comes from the perspective of modern social justice movements. If Stoicism teaches us to accept what is, and to treat external conditions like poverty, inequality, or oppression as indifference in the grand cosmic scheme, does this not inadvertently justify or perpetuate systemic injustice? Critics argue that Stoicism can be seen as promoting a form of quietism among the oppressed, teaching them to cope with their suffering rather than to actively challenge the structures that cause it. The focus on internal virtue, it's argued, can distract from the urgent need for external systemic change. However, a nuanced Stoic response would counter that acting justly, working for the common good, and challenging injustice is a virtuous action, a duty for rational beings and citizens of the world. The acceptance of indifference doesn't mean indifference to suffering or injustice, but rather a detachment from the outcome of one's efforts, ensuring one acts virtuously regardless of success or failure. A Stoic would fight for justice, not for the outcome, but because it is the right thing to do, in alignment with universal reason and the good of humanity. The internal tranquility is what enables sustained, rational action, rather than emotionally charged, potentially irrational, or despairing reactions. Marcus Aurelius, in his tireless efforts as emperor, demonstrates this commitment to action within a framework of philosophical acceptance. To truly appreciate the meditation's place in intellectual history, it's helpful to consider its relationship to other philosophical traditions. A particularly illuminating contrast can be drawn with existentialism, a 20th century philosophy championed by thinkers like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. While both Stoicism and existentialism emphasize individual agency and responsibility, they do so within wildly different cosmic frameworks. Existentialism posits an absurd universe, devoid of inherent meaning or purpose. There is no logos, no divine plan, no preordained order. Human beings are condemned to be free, as Sartre famously put it, meaning we are thrust into existence without a pre-given essence, forced to create our own meaning and values through our choices and actions. This leads to a radical sense of individual responsibility and often a profound sense of anguish or nausea in the face of absolute freedom. Camus, with his myth of Sisyphus, celebrates the individual's defiance and rebellion against an indifferent universe, finding meaning in the conscious struggle itself. Stoicism, by contrast, offers a universe imbued with rational order, governed by the logos. There is inherent meaning and purpose, and human flourishing comes from aligning one's reason and will with this cosmic order. Freedom for the Stoic is found not in creating meaning out of nothing, but in understanding and accepting necessity, in discerning what is within one's control, one's judgments, and what is not external events. The Stoic finds peace in this alignment, rather than anguish in the void. Yet there is a curious echo. Camus's Sisyphus, finding joy in his futile labor through conscious acceptance, exhibits a form of internal triumph over external circumstances that bears a distinct Stoic flavor, internalizing control and finding dignity in the act itself, regardless of the ultimate outcome. Another highly relevant comparison is with modern mindfulness practices and other forms of contemplative philosophy. There are striking parallels between Stoicism and mindfulness. Both emphasize present moment awareness. The Stoics constantly remind us to focus on the now, not to dwell on the past or anxiously anticipate the future. Both advocate for non-judgmental observation. Stoic practice involves dispassionately observing one's impressions and thoughts before assenting to them, much like mindfulness encourages observing thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them. And both stress acceptance. Accepting reality as it is, rather than fighting against it or wishing it were otherwise. However, there are also differences. Mindfulness often has its roots in Buddhist traditions, with concepts like emptiness, impermanence, and non-self, aiming for liberation from suffering through insight into the nature of reality. Stoicism, while sharing practical techniques, is rooted in a specific rational, materialistic cosmology and a robust conception of the individual self as a rational being, a fragment of the universal logos. Mindfulness is often about being fully present. Stoicism is about acting rightly and virtuously from that state of present awareness. Nevertheless, the convergence of techniques and goals, inner peace, emotional regulation, and living consciously, highlights the perennial human quest for wisdom that transcends cultural and historical boundaries. Before we conclude, let's reflect on the historical journey of the meditations itself, a testament to its enduring power. It was not originally intended for publication, but was Marcus's private journal, his spiritual exercises. This very intimacy is what gives it its unique appeal. Yet, despite its personal nature, it survived. For centuries, it was known, copied, and studied, a beacon of classical wisdom. We owe its very existence to unknown scribes and scholars who recognized its value and preserved it through tumultuous times. From its initial survival in fragments and later, more complete manuscripts, through its varied reception in different eras, from the admiration of the scholarly elite to its broader popular appeal today, the Meditations has proven its resilience. Consider also the profound influence of Epictetus, whose teachings, transmitted through his student Arrian's discourses and Enchiridion handbook, shaped Marcus Aurelius and countless others. His ideas resonated not just with emperors, but with figures across the social spectrum, continuing to inspire historical figures through the ages who sought strength and wisdom in adversity. His uncompromising focus on what is truly up to us, our judgments and choices, and his radical emphasis on inner freedom have resonated with generations seeking meaning and resilience. The Stoic spirit, often carried by the words of Epictetus, has informed political thought, psychological practices, and spiritual seeking far beyond the confines of ancient Greece and Rome. In conclusion, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius stands as a monumental work of philosophy, a timeless guide to living a virtuous and tranquil life. While it has faced and continues to face valid criticisms, accusations of emotional coldness, aristocratic bias, quietism, and the challenge of determinism versus free will, these critiques often deepen our understanding of Stoicism's complexities, rather than diminishing its value. Its philosophical influence has rippled through history, inspiring figures from Boethius and Montaigne to Spinoza and Kant, demonstrating its adaptable wisdom. In the modern era, its relevance has surged, finding a powerful resonance in practical applications like cognitive behavioral therapy and fueling a vibrant movement of New Stoicism that seeks to equip individuals with tools for resilience and well-being in a chaotic world. While the challenges of applying ancient wisdom to contemporary life are real, and the potential for superficial interpretation exists, the core insights of Marcus Aurelius remain profoundly potent. The Stoic paradox, the harmonious blend of inner tranquility and active engagement, offers a compelling vision for how to live a meaningful life, contributing to the world while maintaining one's inner peace. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrestling with the immense burdens of empire while striving for personal virtue, leaves us with an enduring legacy. A deeply human and profoundly rational philosophy that continues to offer solace, guidance, and inspiration to those who seek to live with wisdom, courage, and integrity in any age. His private struggle, laid bare on these pages, has become a universal lesson in the art of living well.